Alright, we're back for round 3. Happy to be here. I got a pretty sweet build lined up for today. Last time around was a pretty big investment to simple village improvements, while today we got something I'm going to be real proud of, bringing some life and some vegetation into this world. There's still some work I want to put into this area, but I'm going to save that for when I wind this episode down. Till then, I gotta introduce the next cool thing I got planned. This build is going to be pretty big. Its concept is going to span a ton of space to the point where I'll be essentially building a custom biome for it. Therefore, despite being part of this village, I'm actually going to build it across the river. There's a good reason, and I've attached a bit of story behind it, but I will talk about that once I get the base structure down. That being said, let's get started on the home of the herbalist. Before I introduce the build, isn't that Prismarine animation so cool sped up? I always forget that Prismarine has that color change, and thankfully no matter the shade it changes to, it keeps with this gradient I'd gone for. I went with this blue/cyan gradient. It's probably the best color gradient to learn from if you're uncomfortable with them. You got lots of different blocks to play around with to pick and choose what textures you like, how far you want to take the color change, and you'll get a pretty smooth gradient. Like I mentioned before, this is meant for an herbalist or even a botanist of sorts. And this color combination simply felt right. Very colorful, not quite plant green to help with the upcoming greenery pop out, and the gradients and textures create a bit of a magical aura around the whole thing. Otherwise, right now, the base of the building is very plain. It's got these two dome-style structures attached to this glass extension, which will be a greenhouse of sorts inside, and a basic tower out back. From an actual functionality perspective, being the herbalist's home, this place will house farms I've been severely lacking up to this point. Flowers for dyes, wheat for my mud brick addiction, move that broken moss farm over there, you know, plants. But nothing here really screams herbalist other than this greenhouse, which even that relies on future interior. So before I move on to the next step, I need a lot of green dye. So I'm going to quickly establish a cactus farm within here first. And there we go. I've laid the foundation for where all the future farms are going to be going. I'm keeping it all underground so I have a little more room to do as many farms as I need. But once it's harvested, I did this funky tube transport to the top of the greenhouse just to create a bit of kinetic energy to give this build a little more life. It's a bit messy right now, but that'll all be taken care of with interior work. Now with that taken care of, I should have enough green to quite literally bring the build to life. The rest of the village is grounded in medieval reality, various simple tradesmen, realistic foundation, adult beverage distribution, but very lacking in fantasy magical elements. Not because it doesn't exist in this world, but rather it's not something this tight-knit community wants. Across the river and within what will soon be dense vegetation will live the herbalist, someone who had essentially been isolated for their unwanted experiments. But there is something else that is now keeping the common folk away from it, and that is what I'm going to be building right now. might be a bit much. Now that the main bulk of the exterior is done, I can talk a bit more about what's going on here. Yep, the personality to this building is a killer plant. Obviously taking inspiration from some of my favorite killer plants, the Piranha plant, Audra 2, Biollante, all the goodness that comes from monstrous plants. And this isn't even all. Soon here I'll be spreading the theme around this whole area of land, showing how much havoc this plant has wreaked onto this area. The plant head itself is a bit simple when it comes to design. It took a ton of tinkering to get the organic, living feeling to it, at some point having to redo it in favor of a diagonal angle. I think I got it right though. I'll probably keep tinkering with it, which is something I always do when it comes to organics, but I'm happy with how it and its vines look on top of the building. I even tried to work in a little grin, but unfortunately, I could not figure out how to make it sing. But yeah, obviously it's pretty huge and it's not even done spreading around the area. If you didn't know there was a plant keeper of sorts living over here, well, I think you do now. Just don't mind the red fluid coming out of its mouth here. It doesn't eat people. The build is already coming together so well, and next I'm going to build up a bit of a forest and a bridge, because right now, it's only a tiny bit out of place. Well, between the last clip and now, the world has been updated to 1.21, completely wrecking my workflow and breaking a ton of mods. But whatever, it'll be fixed and ready to go pretty soon. Otherwise, I've been dying to get working with these new blocks. Getting a stone brick shade between deep slate and stone is great for gradients, as well as being a very appealing darker foundation block that's not stupid edgy like deep slate. And those chiseled blocks look fantastic as a trim, as well as a new unique option for floor and roof textures. More walls is just great since they recently changed them, let me check, 4 years ago? And more blocks to work with within the copper shades is just great, especially these bulbs and grates. Also, slabage being available on Tuff allows these cool rocks to be made that have this super smooth mossy transition which I am incorporating into my terrain. Anyways, I've gotten started on the biome around the plant. It's a good start, but I'm going to need a lot of time to fill out the whole area. I'm going for the feeling of very dense, unkept, someplace you don't want to find yourself in, with the building and vegetable barely peeking over the tree line. I also adjusted the plant head itself a little bit, shortening the top row of teeth, as well as changing the head shape a little bit. Like I might have said already, it's an organic. Despite how complete it might be, I will be in a constant cycle of adjusting small pieces of it until it is perfect, which my brain will never say it is. Back to the forest, unfortunately I captured none of the process of building this up, because as of right now, Replay Mod still has not updated, and my first person perspective building this would give you a headache. So instead of lingering on it, I'm just going to go ahead and properly show y'all what I've done so far. Taking a closer look at what I've done here, whoop, mind your step. I continue the path texturing you find at the rest of the village, but it's very bumpy with these rocks all over it. Dirt's been kicked around while being left unswept. This bit of it looks sunken in, it's dirty, it's unmaintained. For the trees you can see I've hand placed all of these trees, with this side not quite having its leaves installed yet, but showing what they essentially look like. A 3x3 base being split into 3 branches that sort of twist into each other, keeping them both thin and branchy, as well as spruce slabs to smoothen out the tree a little bit. The leaves on the other side are pretty unrefined, a bit of a spammed mess right now, that I gotta go in and trim down a bit to allow a bit more vision through the build itself, as well as making it less dense for how much wood is around. Looking at the ground below the tree is just a vegetation overgrowth mess, first making use of podzol and coarse dirt to represent tons of dead leaves, branches, the kind of stuff you'd find in a real forest, as well as moss carpet all over for the extra sense of overgrowth that can also hide lighting underneath. Then the use of these double tall plants, lilacs, rose bushes, tall ferns, they create a sense of unkempt clutter and being untraversable within the forest, with azalea leaves being used as bushes along the walkway, as well as those tough/moss rocks I showed earlier being scattered around. Over here I built a vine coming through the forest which creates a gap in the tree line, and to show a tree once stood there I have a log being crushed under this vine here. With all these pieces taken into consideration, the atmospheric effect this forest has on this area I think is just incredible, pretty perfectly achieving what I want out of this whole build. There's still little bits I want to work on, as well as having to continue spreading it across the area. Wow, this project has taken a while though, taking me about 4 weeks to design the build, gather its materials, place it down, before I even started on the forest, which is another multi-day process for each bit of it I want to do. On top of 1.21 coming in and putting things on hold until the multitude of mods and data packs I rely on are updated and ready to go, if I said I wanted to do anything else in this video, that is out the window right now. Any work on the exterior portion of this build will be covered briefly in future episodes, because I gotta take a break from this area, despite how much I love it. I hope whoever stumbles into this video enjoys it. This has definitely been my favorite piece to work on so far, and I'm incredibly happy to be finally sharing it. Any feedback will be appreciated, especially if you really hate what you're looking at. That being said, that's all I got for you today. I gotta get working on my next thing, and I'll see y'all later.